Hello and welcome to today's video of the Proper Form Friday series. Today we'll be looking at the bicycle crunch. Let's begin. The bicycle crunch is a dynamic core movement with progress usually determined by increases in time or repetitions. The bicycle crunch can be regarded as a compound movement because it works a variety of muscles within the trunk. The primary muscles are the rectus abdominis, the obliques, and the iliopsoas, or more simply, the hip flexor. This movement can be broken down into three parts. Spinal flexion is performed by the rectus abdominis. Spinal rotation is performed by the obliques. And finally, hip flexion is performed by the iliopsoas and the lower portion of the rectus abdominis. How to perform the bicycle crunch? First of all, the bicycle crunch requires reasonable coordination. So if the movement feels difficult and you are unsure as to why, it may just mean that you need more practice with this movement pattern. I suggest the movement being broken down in half, one half being the hip flexion and the other half being spinal flexion and rotation. This way, as you're learning, whether the problem was movement pattern or strength, you'll have both soon enough. To set up for the movement, lay down on your back, either on a ground mat or some other semi-comfortable surface. Have your toes pointed towards the air and raise your hands over behind your head, as if you were back in PE class and you're trying to catch your breath. Refrain from actually grabbing your head because we don't want you to be pulling it during the movement. Next, tense your core and raise your feet and your shoulders off of the ground. From here, we can begin the movement. Bend your left knee up to your chest while simultaneously crunching and rotating your right elbow over in order to tap the knee. If they don't tap, that's perfectly fine. Mine don't either. Then reverse the movement. Extend the left knee back to straight and bring the right shoulder back down to just above the ground. Next, repeat this with the far side, bringing the right knee up and the left elbow over in order to try and tap it. Then reverse back to the starting movement. Now that you can complete this movement, perform it for time or for repetitions. Micro variations. One micro variation would be where you begin the leg position in a slightly higher point off the ground. This may put more demand on the rectus abdominis and slightly less demand on the hip flexors. Regarding range of motion, the range of motion will improve with coordination. However, I don't expect to be tapping my knees anytime soon with my elbows without compromising form. So don't worry if you don't either. The strengths of this exercise. This exercise targets a great amount of muscles within the trunk, all in one movement. This exercise executes spinal extension and rotation simultaneously. Furthermore, there is plenty of regressions to work on the lead up to this exercise. The weaknesses of this exercise. The learning curve, specifically regarding coordination, may take a little time. And although this exercise is relatively advanced and plenty of gains can be made from it, the load potential is quite low, as we can't load it with weight. Therefore, progress can only be performed by either increasing time or repetitions per working sets. Luckily, the injury risk seems to be relatively low, and as long as you don't have any pre-existing injuries, you should be alright to perform this movement. Progressions for the bicycle crunch. As far as I'm aware, the most efficient way to progress from the bicycle crunch would actually be to split up the movement into its constituent parts and progress with those. For spinal rotation, windshield wipers or the Palloff press would be acceptable. For hip flexion, a hanging leg raise, and for spinal flexion, an ab wheel rollout would definitely do the job. Regressions for the bicycle crunch. Ironically, the regressions are also the splitting up of the movement into its constituent parts. I would recommend that you split the lower body leg raise and the upper body rotational crunch separately and perform them as individual exercises. That's everything for the bicycle crunch. I hope you have a great day and I hope you get a strong core.